Simply Trade News Roundup listeners. We're so excited to be back with you guys in 2024. Hi, Lalo. Hi, Andy. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Doing good. Thank you.
My New Year's resolution, one of them, is to keep you guys in the loop, meaning I say hi to you guys every time we're on the podcast, because, sometimes I get so overwhelmed that I'm just forgetting and going straight to the content because, sometimes it's just so good and we just have to skip all the introduction part. But anyways, we have some good articles, two major things happening that we're discussing today. So hopefully you can get some news in while you're driving to work, driving back home, or, just maybe chilling on the couch. So again, let's start this. The first one is from the Red Sea crisis boosts shipping costs, delays, and inflation. So did you guys know that the Red Sea crisis has caused freight rates for shipments from Asia to Northern Europe to double? So I kind of want to address why that's happening and to uncover the links between the crisis and the skyrocketing shipping costs. So what can you guys tell me about that?
Well, you have terrorist attacks with the Houthis that are backed by Iran that are, launching attacks, as well as then the pirates that are trying to take control of some of the cargo ships. And so, if you are a vessel owner, the Maersk, CMA, CGM, and some of the other lines, you've got $100, $200 million ship with all the then cargo that's on there. You don't want to go through and suffer damage from it, nor do you want it to be confiscated and take the risk of losing it. So the problem is with the Red Sea, you have the Suez Canal that goes from the Mediterranean Sea into the Red Sea, and then you can go around, and then it allows them to cut into then the Indian Ocean. So you're going around the northern part of Africa. You can come from the U.S., you can come from Europe, you go through the Mediterranean Sea, Suez Canal, go in and around. If you're trying to get to the other side of going into the Indian Ocean, if your customer's in that. What's happening, since that is so dangerous, they're now having to go the long way around, all the way down through the southern tip of South Africa, around the Cape, and around the Horn there, and then come back up. And so you're adding thousands upon thousands of additional miles of transit time. Plus, it's slower, obviously, to do all that. And so that's where the increased cost is coming from. So
let me take it a little bit further. I want to dive into the potential impact of these higher shipping costs, because it says that it'll have a ripple effect on inflation and the overall economy. And, we are not already in a good place. So what do you think will happen with that?
Well, no, yeah, it's pretty obvious. That shipping costs, as Andy said, it's not like a case of, so we've had stories or articles or whatever, episodes before about the Panama Canal. We've had others of strikes at the port, et cetera, but like in those two scenarios, the shipment is still going through or getting through the route that you're used to. With Panama Canal, of course, you can go all the way around and go a different route. But if you stick with the Panama Canal, it's just going to take you a little bit longer to get through, right? Because of the drought. And when there's strikes at the port, you're not rerouting your traffic. You're just having to wait a little longer because it's a limited crew that's unloading the ships. And again, of course, you can go all the way around and do that. But in this case, you're almost like forced to go all the way around, and adding days and the fuel costs to push this ship. It's unbelievable. It's, lots and lots of fuel to get this done. And that's why it's raising and causing these inflation worries, let's call it, because we haven't really seen it yet. But yeah, that's pretty much, and then But the worst part of it is your supply chain being more vulnerable. I mean, that's I feel, aside from the cost of freight and the prices going up and everything, it's the vulnerability of your supply chain. What can happen there, and how will it be affected, et cetera? Because it's just a mess down there. Let's just call it.
Yeah. Well, and it's affecting $200 billion worth of trade, according to the article. That's a huge amount of trade. Now, that said, this kind of goes back to where companies and people are looking at when they're sourcing their goods, they're looking at sourcing them more regionally now rather than globally because of what? If you look back a while back, the situation with China, everything was going to China. It was Mexico, and then they went to China. Well, now a lot of that's coming back to Mexico because of the geopolitical stress between U.S. and China. But then you have the other scenarios here where in the past you've had situations where, if you remember, there were volcanoes erupting in the Alaska area that negatively affected the air traffic. You have different, geopolitical situations. The same thing here in the Middle East, where it's disrupting that supply chain. So rather than putting all of the sources for a product in one basket, if you will, people are looking at coming up with multiple sources and making sure some of them are regional so that you can avoid some of when there's a disruption in the supply chain, it's going to be more of, hey, at least locally I can get these easier than if you've got product that's halfway around the world, and what am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a bad situation there, what's going on there between the Red Sea crisis and the freight rates and the inflation. So it's all coming together, and we're not in a good situation. Hopefully that can be under control soon, because I know it's still happening, right? I mean, it's ongoing, correct? Okay. Yeah, so hopefully that can be stopped soon. We'll see. We'll keep you updated on that one. Next, we have this can be exciting or not so exciting. We'll see. The U.S. entry points opening and the decrease in migrant crossing. So, yeah, I think there can be different opinions on that. And I just want to see what your opinions, I guess, and statements are for the reopening of the U.S. entry points along the Mexico border. Because what did they say? Ultimately, they said that there's less migrants crossing, so that's why they're able to do this. But because they're stopping them at the Mexican border. I had a talk with Lalo about that before, even because obviously here we are close to the Mexico border. So I think for us, it's beneficial, I believe. We'll see what happens. But what are your statements towards that?
Well, with regards to trade and commerce and even people, it is because, the 4 ports that were affected, first of all, it was Eagle Pass in Texas, Lukeville and Nogales in Arizona, and then San Isidro in California. So I've been through the San Isidro crossing. That one is major. That one is huge. Eagle Pass, I mean, I guess all of them are, but yeah. So the thing is that what we're doing is that we are just pretty much making sure that the ports are still open. Yes, the immigrant flow of immigrants is slowing down. It's slowing down as it hits the northern border. In other words, our border, the American and Mexico border. It's still not slowing down on the southern border for Mexico. In other words, coming from other countries, Central and South America into Mexico, that's still going nuts. That they're just holding them there versus letting them come up to the U.S.-Mexico border, which is slowing down. And this is all part of what Blinken and Anthony Blinken, AMLO, President Amador. I'm sorry, I'm messing this one up. Obrador. They got together recently, and I guess these are part of the agreements that they had. And so, but trade wise, yes, that's really good for us, and it's good that it's not affecting other borders, because it did affect El Paso here where we are earlier in December with a rail yards getting shut down. So, but anyway.
Well, and I'll just say this is that this is where this illegal immigrant scenario, where so many folks are coming across the border from Mexico into the U.S., and they're flooding things. There's another surge that they've got. So I expect that, they're open for now, which is good, but they're going to get shut down again because resources are going to have to be diverted to deal with the immigration, and that leaves the trade facilitation to stop. So this is just basically where folks need to look at it and say, the cause and effect, it's negatively impacting trade and, business and the U.S. GDP and the Mexican GDP, quite frankly, as they're looking at this because of this open borders type scenario. And whether you like it or not, it's just the fact of life that's what's going on. So saying that, then the scenario here is what's also troubling in the same article. There's a huge influx of people from Venezuela and other countries other than Mexico. So it's not just Mexican. It's from all over the world. So anyway, so it's good that it's opened back up. Things are a bit more manageable, supposedly. And from the trade facilitation perspective, that means that you need to make sure that your transaction, your shipment information is transmitted early, it's accurate, you have as much information on there as possible, and not being vague with your descriptions and whatever, so that your goods can be processed versus getting hung up. And if it gets delayed in the midst of all this, resources are even more stretched in dealing with the stuff that's not immediately cleared. So you're better off to do your things up front.
Well, interesting stuff. And I guess we're just also going to have to monitor those top two things that we're talking about are just things that are ongoing. And we don't know what the outcome will be. And we can say that it might be beneficial for trade and stuff, but we'll see. And we'll see, maybe they'll be closed soon again. Who knows? But let me pull up the last article, which is JD Supra. I believe did we have him on the podcast?
No. JD Supra is a firm that publishes.
I thought that I saw him on the podcast.
No, we had a guy named JD. He's
that's where I get that from. That's exactly where I get that from. Okay. Yeah, it's a law firm, right? Yeah.
It's a service where you can get articles for attorneys in law. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's why I see it. All right. Well, they have a good article. They have a few good articles that we usually repost. And this one is that CBP export seizures, breaking the rules and facing the consequences. So I think now that we're starting the new year, it's important for firms to really get in touch with the laws. And I mean, obviously they should already know that, but making sure everyone's compliant and everyone knows what they're doing and they have all their files and stuff. So it said that CBP has the power to enforce exports regulations, and which we kind of know, but they went deeper into it. So why should exporters be cautious to see how violations can lead to potential seizures? Do you guys have anything to say about that or share on this article?
Well, let me just jump in and just say that, again, customs and the government is really focused on enforcement. In 2024, it's going to be even higher levels of enforcement. With that means that you need to do a good job, whether you're exporting or importing, especially if you're exporting, you're selling your goods abroad. You need to be looking at vetting who you're doing business with. Vetting means check them out. Look to see, before you enter into a transaction, you better find out who you're dealing with, where the money's coming from, what they're going to do with your products. and those kinds of things. Because as you're selling these goods, you want to stimulate international trade. That's good for business, but you don't want to do it with nefarious folks. And so what will happen is, as these goods are being sent out, and if you have not done your due diligence to check out who you're doing business with and what is happening with your goods, or if your goods require a license to be exported and you haven't filed for the license, can you afford to lose your goods, period? So that's what's going to happen in this. And so, again, if you are new to international, hire an expert, get some folks involved to make sure you're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Because if you get to that point where your goods are detained and seized, the next call you better be making is to a customs attorney firm. And we've had several on our show that are very good, but they're going to have to help you because you are now into a very bad situation.
And part of the problem, I guess, let me add this much. Coincidentally enough, and this is a plug for most of the shows that are going to be airing this month in January. And that's mostly because what's going on is that a lot of the guests that we've had this year have been talking about and letting us know that enforcement is big for 2024. And so is what and how you gather data and use that data, because not only AI, I mean, AI is unfairly being treated here in the sense that it might be doing bad things or whatever. It doesn't matter. But what's happening is that a lot of the data is helping CBP find what's wrong or who you're dealing with. And so, like Andy talked about, finding out who you're working with, who you're selling this to, if there's anybody bad out there. That's true, but just like an importation, you need to know who your suppliers are, down to the raw material. I feel that also, Andy, don't you think people need to know not only who you're selling it to, but who they may be selling it to at the other end, because you're still on the hook for that. If you sell it to a reputable company in the EU, for example, but they happen to sell it to somebody else who is going to then ship it out to Iran, for example, you're in trouble because you're the one that exported it. You're supposed to know that. So not only are you supposed to know your customer, you should also know your customer's customer, et cetera. What's the end use of this? Where's it going to end up? And so we're coming, unfortunately, and it's not unfortunate. It's just more because that information is more available these days. Now it's easier to find, how to get to those violations, and who is not doing things properly. So I just feel that this year is a year of enforcement, the year of, making sure the data works for you and helping you with that. And again, just listen to all the episodes. We just had Alan last week talking a lot about that. Later this week, Alan Burson, former Commissioner Alan Burson. And then later this week, we're going to have Vinny Annunziato, who's still with CBP, and he has a really good episode on what Customs is doing on their end and how they want to help us. I mean, not only, transparency of data, and then later in the month, we're going to have Amy and Cindy talking about data as well and enforcement. And so this whole month, we're fun-filled month of tips and information that you should be aware of.
Yeah, Amy Magnus and Cindy Allen have given some really good points, and we're going to have them back on the show as well to get into more detail. But the point being the enforcement. Let me give you a quick scenario here. If you've got a product and that has, let's say you have a medical device. Let's say that you have some kind of electronic device that you're selling or whatever. You want to make sure that those goods stay, compliant and all that. You can't be shipping them off to some of the sanctioned countries or whatever. But here's an example is that a while back, if I'm not mistaken, they were some kind of electronic machine equipment or whatever that was sold, and they did not put the proper clauses in the contract in the sale so that person was told, you should not be sending this to somebody else. And so they wound up taking this equipment, taking some of the components out of that equipment and putting them into some drones that were used for missiles or bombing some certain situations. Well, guess what? When those units exploded, the U.S. military were taking pieces of those things and traced back the components of that back to a U.S. company. And guess what? Do you want to be a company that says your components are in a terrorist bomb or in a terrorist missile or something like that? No. So the scenario, though, even though that was not what the goods were used for, they took those components out and used them in a different way. So you've got to be able to put these things together and vet these folks together properly, if I'm trying to say that. And then, again, if you've got some red flags, don't do business. It's not worth the risk.
Well, I like this little foreshadowing of what's to come. And yeah, go listen to those episodes, because Cindy Allen, I did see parts of it, and she seemed like explaining it very well. And we also have some videos up on our LinkedIn if you want to check that out, if you just want little snippets. Also, okay, one last thing I wanted to ask, but this is just a 1-2 word answer, so no need for an explanation. So we can wrap this episode up. No, you guys did great. The episode we're so good in time, which is amazing, because we don't want to do it so long for you guys. So you have the time to go to work, and then the episode ends, you don't have to start it up again. Anyways, where was I? Okay. So what is your word for 2024? So trade word, let's say, like, for me right now, I looked something up. It'll be real-time tracking to enhance supply chain management. That'll be something that's happening in 2024. What is the biggest word for you guys? If you guys could just choose one right now. I know there's many, but one.
I would say enforcement is what we just mentioned.
Yeah, and mine is a combination of both of yours. Is the data and the automation behind whatever you said, Annik, and whatever Andy said, to make sure that enforcement, you're not at the receiving end of a bad audit or something, So anyway, but yeah, I think that
data management, I would say, in a sense, is probably a good way of putting it.
Awesome. Okay, well, that is a wrap up for this episode. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope this kind of helped to get you understanding and kind of, I don't know. I'm struggling today to talk. It's crazy.
It's because you can't wait to get that piece of the king's cake. Today's Friday, by the way.
I was thinking about it, actually. I was thinking about it.
Today's Friday, the 5th of January, and tomorrow is King's Day or Epiphany. And here on the border, and many parts, even New Orleans and many parts, Christians celebrate with that king's cake where you cut it up in pieces. In case nobody knows, I'm sorry. And then you try to get the little baby Jesus. Yeah, baby Jesus.
I think
so. We're getting ready to do that here at the office, by the way. So
I think in Germany they go across the neighborhoods and they write on the walls. They write on your door. That's what we do. I think that's what we do. I don't know if that's a different day, but I think that's what we do. Anyways.
Oh, you promote graffiti on your door, huh?
No, they have they have chalk. They use chalk. And it stays on all year. It's actually really nice. I'll figure it out if I can find it somewhere, and I'll send it to you guys.
Going door to door, singing carols and collecting money for charity. And that's what you're talking about in Germany. Yeah.
And they're writing on they write like a signature thing. They're like the year thing, the whatever. Anyways. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you have a beautiful week and the second week of 2024. Awesome. Make it a good one. So anyways, gotta go. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.